So we'll be doing Chanukah today. Chanukah Chassidus. You have the booklet from yesterday, I assume. If you don't, I'll give you one. Every booklet. So for those wondering here last year, I want to show you something interesting.
Is that a gun? That's cool.
This is a butt of a rifle. Good morning. This is a butt of a rifle. This is bullets.
That's so cool.
And this is from the cannons. I didn't make it myself, no. Like Gacha Pratis, I was traveling somewhere and there was a storm and we had to take another flight and ended up meeting someone who was also on the plane and he was an Israeli, Oded Luria. He was very proud to say that he's in the son of Rabbi Yitzchak, the Arizal.
Wow.
But he wasn't religious at all. And he was, in the beginning, he had no time, then he put on film, and eventually we made a connection, and we were in touch. I was in touch with him until eventually, unfortunately, he passed away. But he said that he has two items that he wants it to be in good hands because unfortunately his children don't appreciate anything in Yiddishkeit. So he has two things that are very precious to him, and he wants someone to have it. So these are the two things. He was in the Israeli army. He did some project, I don't know what, and he said it was very successful. So as acknowledgement of what he did, they gave him this as a gift. He says this is a German butt of a German rifle. And the other thing was when you become a soldier, they give you a small Tanakh. So he had that Tanakh. These are the two things. But the interesting thing is that I don't know if you understood the depth of it, but really that's what Chanukah is all about. Turning darkness into light, to take every single item here which is made for darkness, for destruction of life, turn that into a menorah that gives life. Okay, so we're going to talk about Chanukah. You weren't here in the afternoon yesterday, were you? Yes, you were. You were in the afternoon. Okay. Yeah.
Told me to tell you she's in doctor's appointment.
Who's this?
This
Oh. Who gave her permission to be sick? Okay, so hi Raizel, you got this booklet?
No, I did not.
Okay. This is just a collection of things that relate to Chanukah al Chassidus, different subjects and different memorim. So we did something yesterday in the afternoon. Let's do another piece. I want to do a piece that relates to our mimer. So this is, if you would look on page. Mhm. Thank you. Look on page 7. So that's what we have the Alanissim, which we say on Chanukah. And it's describing in brief, very brief, what the whole story of Chanukah is about. So it says, Kishamdo Machaz Yavin Rasha, which means when the evil Hellenistic government rose, Alamchi Yisrael, upon your nation, and then it says two things, Lashkichem Teresecha, they wanted to make you forget, wanted us to make forget your Torah, Ulavira Mechuker Tzenecha, and to get us to violate your chukim. So the language is very precise. What it should have said is Lashkicham HaTorah, to forget the Torah. Why does it have to emphasize the word Torah Secha? And the second thing, when it comes to mitzvahs, it says Laviri Mechuker Tzenecha. Why doesn't it just say and to make us violate your commandments? So we explained the other day that the main goal of the klipa of Yevonim, the klipa of this nation, primarily is, as we know, the Greeks were philosophers. That was their ideology, their culture was to be philosophical and study and intellect. And to a certain extent, we can say that was the idol that they worshipped, intellect. That everything is intellectual and based on intellect, and that's what's acceptable. Other than that is unacceptable. So to a certain extent, they would even agree that Yidden should be permitted to study Torah. There are different fields of intellect. There's science, there's math, there's medicine, and there's another field of intellect, which is law, justice, and things like that. The Jews have their laws. What's so terrible? They're going to study their Torah. So the truth is they didn't even mind that Yidden would study Torah. The klipa of Yevonim was mainly against studying Torah as Torah Secha. The idea that Torah is something that has in it Hashem, Hashem's presence is in it. And by learning Torah, we become connected to Him. That's the part which they were trying to eliminate. So this is sort of reflected in what it means when it says they made all the oil tamei. When you make something tamei, there's no difference. You look at the oil before and you look at the oil after, nothing changed. In fact, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there's a halacha that when you do damage to another person, you have to pay for the damage, right? What if you do the kind of damage that there's nothing noticeable that it was damaged? For example, something like this. Person has food, and you make the food tummy. Now it's not edible, they can't eat the food. But when you look at the food, you don't see anything damaged. Person takes someone else's box, a case of wine, and allows somebody who's not Jewish to handle the wine. As a result of that, it becomes yayin nesach, it's not kosher. But if you look at the wine, nothing changed. According to halacha, you're not obligated to pay. Why? Because there's nothing noticeable that's damaged here. That's another question. Why does it matter? And so on and so forth. But when you make something tamei, there's nothing that's there out in the open that changed. Well, what did change was before it was pure, and now it's impure. Or before something could have been part of the Beis Hamikdash, it's holy, and now that you did what you did, you made it unholy. But the holy and unholy, you don't see it. The structural part of this didn't change. The neshama of it changed. And that's, in a sense, why they would have allowed you to learn Torah, which means the structural part of learning Torah can go on, but to study Torah as any other academic pursuit. And the holiness of Torah, that was the part. So unfortunately, it's possible, even today, a person to be very passionate about Torah, passionate about the questions and passionate about the answers, and passionate about accumulating knowledge, vast knowledge, but there's no real focus on the fact that this is Hashem's Torah, and through learning Torah, I'm becoming one with Hashem himself. Someone told me that he saw this in a sefer. So it means the one who wrote it was actually a Torah scholar. And he was such a Torah scholar to the point that he was capable of writing a commentary on Torah, and he printed it. And obviously it was sold. So he has something in the sefer where he asks a question, and the question is that it seems to be a contradiction. There's one place where the rabbis say that Hashem created the Yetzer Hara, but he also created a spice that neutralizes the Yetzer Hara. What is that spice called? Torah. Okay. But there's another source that says that the Yetzer Hara is so strong, if not for the fact that Hashem would help you, you'd never be able to overcome him. So it's a contradiction. Here it says that Torah helps you overcome the Yetzer Hara. Here it says Hashem makes you overcome the Yetzer Hara. Good question. Very good. Right. So the question alone is pretty shocking. What kind of question is that? Torah and Hashem is one. When it says that the Torah will help you overcome it, it's because there's Hashem in Torah. The answer is even better. The answer is, if you are a person that you are a simple Jew, not knowledgeable of Torah, so you don't have Torah, but Hashem will help you overcome the Yetzer Hara. But if you're a Torah scholar, you don't need Hashem's help because you have Torah. What does this mean? If you analyze this kind of commentary, it basically means that in this person's head, Torah and Hashem are two separate things. But what could be separate? The answer is Torah is wisdom, Torah is logic, Torah is something intellectual, and Hashem commanded us to learn the Torah. So imagine if Hashem would command us to study medicine. So you'd be studying medicine. Medicine is medicine, and while I'm doing it, I'm observing a mitzvah. So Torah is a field of wisdom, and when I'm learning it, I'm basically fulfilling Hashem's mitzvah. But Torah itself is chas v'shalom like any other field of wisdom. And this explains something which on the surface would be very difficult to understand. The Gemara is discussing what is the reason why the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. The second one we all know. It was destroyed because of sinas chinam. There was a lot of hate. But what was the first one? And there are different reasons that are given, different opinions. One opinion says something like this, because they didn't make a bracha on the Torah before they started learning. Okay, it's not a nice thing. You got to make a bracha, but is it so severe? If you don't make a bracha, that's a reason to bring destruction of the Beis Hamikdash and galus and everything goes along with it. There was one of the commentators on the Shulchan Aruch. His name is the commentary is called Bach, and by Rosh chodesh, and he says that what it means is when you make the bracha, what are we saying? Baruch atah Hashem, thank you Hashem, Neisna Torah, the one that gave us the Torah. The purpose of making the bracha before is not only to thank Hashem, but to recognize that Hashem invested himself in the Torah. And when we learn Torah, we're embracing Hashem, we're connecting with him, we're bonding with him. And that's the main reason for Torah study. So true, Torah is logical, Torah is intellectual, but to use the example of a capsule, like when you take a capsule, it's the powder in the capsule that gives me, whatever energy I need, whether it's a vitamin, whether it's a medicine, and the capsule is just a container. So to a certain extent, the wisdom in Torah is just a container for something much deeper, much greater, and that's Hashem's infinite presence was invested in the Torah. And therefore, if a person studies Torah not because it's Hashem, but because of other reasons, then what happens is that you're not going to end up studying Torah the proper way, and eventually people will use Torah to distort things because you don't have that bittul to Hashem. And unfortunately, that's what happened throughout the ages. There were many people who were brilliant Torah scholars, but they used their knowledge of Torah to distort the halacha and distort Torah perspectives and do things which were actually against Torah. And the classical example of that is one of the people that is considered like the worst violator of Torah in history, to the extent that it says that this would be an example of a person that could never have a share in the world to come, is someone called Yerovim ben Nevat, who is a king. And he is a king that forced people to worship idols. He forced people to worship idols, not to go to the Beis Hamikdash. And and the Gemara says that he was a Torah scholar. Not only that, he knew Torah, he was such a big Torah scholar that all the Torah scholars in his generation would be considered insignificant to his knowledge of Torah. So the Gemara asks, if that's the case, how did he end up doing what he did? And the Gemara asks because he studied Torah the wrong way, not the right way. So therefore, studying Torah as an academic pursuit, that's what leads, even in our generation, the Reform movement, which was founded by someone called Moses Mendelssohn in Germany. He was a Torah scholar. And he also wrote a book, a commentary on Torah. But because he was studying Torah as an academic pursuit, he basically distorted a lot of things. He used everything in his own mind to explain things the way he liked to explain them, and basically used Torah to justify things that he wanted to do, which is namely assimilation, but based it on the way he distorted the understanding of Torah. I'm not sure the details, but that's the general idea of what happened. So to a certain extent, this is what it's all about with the Yevonim. They are the klipa of Chochmah, but Chochmah of klipa. And Chochmah of klipa means wisdom without God, just wisdom. And that's why the Gemara says that if someone would tell you that non-Jews have wisdom, believe them. You know, there's some people that are sort of, they are naive. If you tell them that there's a man who wasn't Jewish and he was brilliant and he invented this or invented that, how could a non-Jew, what do you mean, how could? Non-Jews have wisdom like anybody else. They're human beings. And Hashem gave them wisdom. And they were brilliant people. In fact, the Gemara says that there used to be debates with certain non-Jews, and especially very big philosophers amongst the Greeks. And there was one of the sages, I think it was Rabbi Shua ben Levi, he was always the one who was able to debate with them. And the Gemara says that they were talking about what would happen once he's no longer here. There's nobody to match them because they were so brilliant, but he was equally brilliant. How are we going to handle it? And the Gemara says, if there won't be anybody in the Jewish nation to match them, then there won't be anybody in the non-Jewish nation that's so brilliant. Because Hashem makes everything in a balanced way. So there is brilliance, but that's not godly. That's called Chochmah the Klipa. And eventually we know where their Chochmah leads them to. So the Chochmah led to not believing that Hashem created the world and everything's from evolution, or other conclusions that their Chochmah brings them to. A lot of the craziness that goes on in this world today, right now, comes from Chochmah the Klipa, people who are supposedly wise, educated, intelligent, and they use their intelligence to produce all sorts of ideas how to live life, which years ago was considered by everybody immoral, and they're making it with their seichel, making it moral. So this answers the other question: why does it say chukim and say necha? As if to say the emphasis is mainly on chukim. We know the difference between chukim and other mitzvahs are. Other mitzvahs are things that are more rational. You can understand. You can make sense of it. Mitzvahs that we can't understand. So their main arrows were aimed at those mitzvahs which are chukim, more than other mitzvahs. Why? Because if it's something you could understand, they were fine. So that's your culture. Your culture is that you like to do this and this because you have this and this reason. But this idea to submit myself to Hashem and do things that don't make any sense, there's no logic to it, only because Hashem said so, that's something which they were against. Which means even looking at Hashem and accepting Hashem's thing, but from a logical perspective, was also acceptable, as long as you're following logic, because logic was to them the highest thing. And therefore, they were mainly against the union of chukim. But based on what we learned in Basi Lagani, the way Chassidus explains it, is that in essence, all mitzvahs, all commandments, even those that are the most logical, in essence, they come from Hashem, and Hashem's essence is above logic. That means the real source of all mitzvahs, even the logical ones, like honoring parents, or mitzvahs like not to kill, not to steal, all those that are moral and ethical, they too originate in a place which is infinite, which comes from above seichel. But it makes so much sense. So the answer is, Hashem took his infinite light, and some of the mitzvahs, he made them evolve and manifest in a logical way. And some of the mitzvahs, he wanted them to be left in the way they are, which is above logic. But all of them originate in a place of logic. What?
Place of logic or above logic?
In other words, you have mitzvahs which are mishpatim, logical mitzvahs, ethical, moral mitzvahs. Then you have mitzvahs which you can't understand. So what we're saying is that in essence, they all come from the same place. It comes from Hashem. Hashem's essence is above logic, like we learned in Basi Lagani. He's beyond the realm of logic. So how come some of the mitzvahs are logical? So the answer is, in essence, they're not. What Hashem did was he took something which is above logic and he allowed it to manifest in a way that we can grasp it with logic. But in essence, that's not the essence of the mitzvah. To give an example, when people rationalize something, which means I want to do something, and the reason why I want to do it is just because I want to. It's fun. Or I want to take revenge. But then the person will explain it logically, how it makes sense that they're doing what they want to do. And we're seeing now, unfortunately, what's happening with Israel, how people are intelligent people, have all sorts of logical explanations why Israel is the one that's at fault instead of the Arabs. And you're listening and you feel like just screaming, but you can't. These people, they're talking, they think that they make sense. What does all that mean? Or, the way it goes with the Nazis. They also were intelligent people. The Nazis were not a third world country. They were progressive. They were cultured. They were the Enlightenment. They were the Germany. That's where all the universities were. And yet they did something which was beyond any human comprehension, acted like worse than animals. And yet they explained everything intellectually, how this will make the world a better place. What does it mean? If you have a hate for someone and you want to do something, in your mind, it'll make sense to you. I mean, something which really doesn't originate in logic, it just originates in hate, for example, but because you want it, it'll take on a form of logic and make perfect sense. So if someone is criticizing another person, so we have a mimer that we once learned that a person's criticizing another person, it could come from a place of jealousy. I'm jealous of that person. I feel that they're doing so much better than me. So therefore, I see the fault and I criticize them doing something wrong. It makes me feel better and it's a little bit soothing to my jealousy. So that means the origin of this is jealousy. But how does it appear outwardly? I would never admit it's jealousy. No, it's really wrong what he's doing because of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I have 10 reasons why it's wrong what they're doing. So we see that things that are not logical could take on a form of logic. So lahavdil by Hashem, what Hashem says to do a mitzvah like gemilas chasadim, to do acts of kindness, the original source of that is in a place which is bli gvul, above logic, above the realm of logic. But Hashem wanted this mitzvah to come to a place where we can understand it and it can make sense for us. And then other mitzvahs, he left them in a way that they're still above logic, which is fulfilled. Yeah.
So if
if all mitzvahs derive from a place that's so far above logic, why do we still like hunger to understand and like look for the logic?
Because that's part of Hashem's mitzvah. He wants us to understand whatever could be understood of the mitzvah. In other words, even though the essence of the mitzvah is above logic, but Hashem wants it to be grasped through the intellect. The main reason for that is anything which I can't grasp intellectually doesn't really penetrate the pneumius.
Thank you.
Who is the person and what is the person? It's me and my logic, what I understand. So if I do something which I don't understand, even if I'm doing it because I'm devoted to Hashem and I'm loyal, I'm dedicated, but the fact they don't understand means there's a part of me that's not really getting it. And therefore Hashem wants us to internalize everything of Torah as much as possible, and therefore we try to understand whatever we could understand. And that helps us to some degree internalize it. Faith is very powerful. You know, this is the famous thing with Nasav and Ishma. If the main thing is just to do what Hashem wants without questioning, why do we even have to study? That's really what your question is. Why do we have to study Torah?
We have a Yetzer Hara, and our Yetzer Hara follows the animal laws, and it deteriorates, memory deteriorates because of it.
Yeah, but if I'm going to have a strong Amunah, I don't need anything. I don't care about the Yetzer Hara. I just have Amunah. Whatever Hashem says goes. The Yetzer Hara says something, tell him go fly a kite. I don't want to hear what you have to say. Why do we have to understand? And in fact, we know that when Hashem gave the Torah and Eden said Nasa v'nishma, Nasa means we're committing ourselves with unconditional faith. And Nishma means we're going to understand. They got two crowns, one for Nasa and one for Nishma. Why do you need a crown for Nishma? Why is it so important? Why can't it be just serve? In fact, you'd be so much more safe if you don't use your intellect. Just do what Hashem says. Like a simple Jew, just do what he says. You don't have any questions, and you don't have any doubts, and you don't even engage any challenging thoughts. You just do what has to be done. But the answer is, if it wouldn't involve the intellect, then to a certain extent, it's not really penetrating who you are. I use my intellect for business, for all sorts of personal things. When it comes to Torah, my intellect is not involved. That means I'm not, internally, I don't really connect to this. So therefore, we have to understand. But we have to remember that it's based on something which is above logic, and that's really the basis of my observance, not the logic. The logic is just to internalize it, but the commitment to do it and to live this way comes from a place which is Amunah.
What would be the Hebrew word for logic? Is it Chokhmah or Seichel? Or...
Seichel. Amunah and Seichel. Okay. So this also explains another thing. That's why the way to overcome the clip of Yavan was through Mesiras Nefesh. Because with Chachma, you wouldn't be able to overcome it. I'm Chachma, they're also Chachma. I have a reason, they'll give me a reason to challenge my reason. I'll answer them, they'll find another answer. With logic, it's almost no end. The only way to overcome the klipa of Yavan, which is the klipa that everything has to be based on wisdom and logic, is with Mesiras Nefesh, that's above logic. And then I can overcome Seichel. So in the times of Chanukah, the Avodah of the Chashmonaim, which brought about the victory, was because they had Mesiras Nefesh. The fact that they went out to fight against an army which was huge, and they were just a small handful of people. That Mesiras Nefesh is what brought the victory of Chanukah. this is all hinted in Haneris Alolu. One of the things we say is that you're not allowed to have any benefit from the candles. Why not? Shabbos candles, you have benefits. Why can't you have benefit from the candles? Well, the answer is the difference between Amunah and Seichel. You want to say something? Yeah.
I was going to say, so it's clear that these aren't just like everyday ordinary candles, like they show a spiritual victory rather than something like if we're
Right.
doing physical tasks by the light of the fire,
Right.
then it would be more of celebrating the physical victory.
That's why it's candles. But why can't I benefit from the light of the candles? Halachically, that's why we have the shamash, because you can't read by this light, which is different than Shabbos candles. Shabbos candles is dafka to benefit from the light. It should be light in the house. And Chanukah was saying, we're lighting candles, but don't benefit from it. So one of the ways to explain the Chassidus is that the difference between Seichel and Amunah is when you understand something logically, you enjoy it. In fact, the Hebrew word for reason is tam. Tes ayin mem means reason. And the Hebrew word for taste is also tam. Tes ayin mem. Because when you understand something, it gives you tremendous pleasure. When you do something, when you don't understand it, even though you're doing it because that's what's supposed to be done, that's what Hashem wants, but it doesn't have that pleasure that you get when you really understand the depth of what you're accomplishing. We see with ourselves, you learn about certain things, and one day you go into a class and someone explains the reason why we do this, and it's like, wow, what happened? Because when you understand, it gives you a certain pleasure. When it says that I allowed to benefit pleasure from the candles, it's alluding to the fact that these candles represent Emunah and Mesiras Nefesh, which is higher than Seichel. So that was the only thing that can overcome Yavan is Mesiras Nefesh, which is above Seichel. That's also why Chanukah is 8 days. Why other Yom Tovim are 7, Chanukah is 8. The difference between 7 and 8 is 8 represents above nature. 8 represents above logic. Generally speaking, the cycle of nature is divided in 7. That's why there's 7 days of the week. And so many other things in Torah that correspond to that by number 7. But 8 represents above the cycle of nature, which basically means above the rules and principles of logic. Okay. Let's touch on another subject. When I asked yesterday if you know what number 1 is, I think everyone said yes. But I'm not sure if you know, if you meant to say you know that there's a machlekes between Shammai and Hillel, or that you know the reason for Shammai. Hillel is understood. That you should always be adding and doing more. What about Shammai? Shammai says to do less.
Like the bulls and
Like the bulls in the Beis Hamikdash. But how is it understood that in Kedusha to go down? We always know that in Kedusha you're supposed to go up. You know, there's even halachas that if you have a certain item that you use it. I'll give you an example. Just an example that's so even much less than this. We have tefillin to go for the head and tefillin to go for the arm. And the tefillin that goes for the head is considered more kedusha than the one for the arm. If you use the ritzus, which means the straps that you would use for the shalyat, for the hand, once you use it, you can change it for the head. But the one for the head, you can't use for the hand because you're lowering in Kedusha. If you take money, you dedicate this money to build a shul, you can't use it for something else, which is less important. And there's a whole halakha of what is higher and what's lower, but there's a rule, in Kedusha, you got to go higher. And here we're saying, first night, 8, 7, 6. How do you explain that? And when I wrote a number 1, isn't just, if you notice, think of the first letter of each word, a number 1. Ches Neirus V'Halacha K'Beis Hillel. What does that spell? If you have just the first letter of each word.
Could you say the letters again?
Ches Neiros V'Halacha K'Beis Hillel. Spells Chanukah. 8 Neiros and the halacha is like Beis Hillel. So the general answer is like this. According to Beis Shammai, you're also supposed to go higher and higher every day. So why does he say to do less light? So first I'll give the general answer. This time I'll go into the detail. The general answer is that the fact that you're going higher, to give an example, that we just learned that Sikha, that the nations of the world got together and they said that we should live more peaceful, no more wars. One of the things that happened is that they destroyed the weapons. And as time went on, they destroyed more and more of the weapons, especially of mass destruction. Weapons that have to do with nuclear weapons. What does it mean? You're destroying or you're going forward? Because you're going forward in a peaceful way, therefore we're getting rid of the weapons. We don't need the weapons. According to Beis Shammai, being that every day we're going higher, which means there's less darkness. If that's the case, I need less light. So the first day, I attack the darkness with 8 candles. The second day, I don't need 8 armies anymore. 7 armies are enough. And the next day, 6 are enough. And the next day, 5 are enough. Basically, what he's saying is that this sequence of going down is actually an indication of going forward, that because we're going higher, we don't need the light. And Beis Hillel says, no, the way to express that we're going forward should be by lighting an additional candle every night. So what's the difference between the two? That needs a little bit more time. But the gist of it is that there's 2 ways to work on self-refinement. One is to work on the positive, and then automatically the negative will be eliminated. And the other one is to work on the negative and then allow the positive to come in. You know, the 2 mashalim that are given, if you have a house that's full of filth and garbage, and you want to move in with nice, beautiful furniture, what do? First you bring in the beautiful furniture, and then you clean up? Or first you clean up, and then you bring in the furniture? What?
I cleaned before enough.
If you bring in all the beautiful furniture in a place of filth, it'll all get filthy. So first you clean up, and then you bring in the beautiful things to decorate. However, there's another example, and that's light and darkness. What do you first do? First you take out the darkness and then bring in the light? Well, no, you bring in the light, and the darkness naturally leaves. But not yet. So these are the 2 shittas. Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel says, focus on the light. Focus on the positive, and the light will be gone. And therefore, he says every day you have to have more light. Beis Hillel's focus, Beis Shammai rather, his focus is on getting rid of the negative. And being that that's the focus, where do you feel and how do you feel every day that you're going forward, that I'm getting rid of the negative? So every day I need less light to get rid of the negative because I've already achieved part of that mission. Till the last day, all I need is 1 candle. There's a few more things, which we'll do tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the last day of Chanukah, which is going to be Thursday, besides the fact that at the end of Chanukah is the 8th day, it has sort of its own name. It's called Zois Chanukah, and it's a very special day for brachas and all good things. And we'll be there to explain that as well when we get there. Okay. Very welcome. That's enough of the good day, everybody.